Thank you. Um, so now reading the topic of my talk today, um, I must say that while facing the horrible and tragic reality in Palestine, Israel, and especially the disastrous, tragic reality in the situation in Gaza, now that the threat from Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, it might be perceived kind of a little bit cynical to speak about peace and peacemaking. Nevertheless, not giving up, practicing inner peace, and being socially engaged in whatever we can is the only source for comfort and hope that I can find in the midst of pain, death, horror, and shame. Using Thich Nhat Hanh saying that peace is in every step or in every breath. Having said this, I will try in this coming session with you to share my understanding of what is peacemaking from perspective of a socially engaged Buddhism, thereby try to focus on the continuous dynamic between inner and outer peace. Then, of course, I will dive deeper to the principles, concepts, and practices in our peacemakers movement, Zen peacemakers movement. And I will conclude by trying to exemplify all of this in my modest practice. Um, although, a minute, I want to see here. Yes. Although big and abstract concept for me, peace is the notion of deep calmness, in my opinion, and well-being, a momentary feeling of wholeness, like a perfect picture you would like to freeze or frame, a perfectly harmonious sound you would like to pause and listen to, an exact balance of mind, body, and heart. A peaceful mind, a flawless stream of interconnectedness inward and outward, and a warm feeling of interdependence with no otherness. Peace is a never-ending process. It is a process of constant effort, of trying to balance body and mind, to bridge our internal state of mind with external actions and behavior. Peacemaking is a process which is an ongoing path of practicing, a practicing focusing on constantly finding the missing parts of a puzzle, weaving the needed fabric parts for a quilt, or trying to bridge contradicting forces. This path is practiced in our consciousness as inner peacemaking or inner reconciliation, and it is practiced also in a parallel path as an outer peacemaking. So, inner peace is a state of mind characterized by continuity, by non-separation of us and others, or even by contradicting parts complementing each other. In order to avoid suffering caused by separation, excluding choices and preferences, we have to practice our ability to contain and embrace our contradicting forces and those which differentiating us from the others. Out of this embracement process, we learn to accept ourselves as we are and develop compassion towards ourselves and others, compassion which is unconditioned. In the process of practicing external peace, we do not necessarily challenge ourselves with solving or avoiding conflicts, but more fundamentally practice the mere fact of going out of ourselves, thereby practicing our being part of a wider space, a wider ecosystem, being aware to the flow, to the wider surrounding to which we exhale and from which we inhale. In this surroundings ecosystem, we try to expand our practice of perceiving the differences without defining them as others, acknowledging the interconnectedness and the way all differences are embraced and contained. In this context of interconnectedness and flow, social engagement is a practice of contributing to the greater good, while at the same time contributing directly to our well-being. The same mutuality is true while taking an active part in developing externally, which is simultaneously reflected in our personal growth. By being socially engaged and acknowledging the mutuality, we develop our ability to respond and to make a difference, even minor, on our external as well as internal world, and thereby recognize our responsibility to act, but yet act responsibly. Eventually, it is a cyclical process. Practicing inner peace means training the mind to avoid splitting between others and ourselves, accepting the diversity. As much as we are feeling inner peace, we are having more resilience and confidence physically and emotionally. Out of that, we are open to the interconnectedness in the outer world, practicing outer peace. Then we are ready to be socially engaged in our surroundings, finding platform in small scale or bigger scale to do good and spread peacemaking around us. Now, I will address mainly to the Zen peacemakers, principles, perceptions, and practices. Most of the things that I will talk about are out of talks and practicing with Bernie Glassman, reading his books and materials about him, and ongoing practicing with the Zen peacemakers during many, many years, and with my teacher, Roshi Barbara. So what about the principles of the peacemaking or Zen peacemakers? What we are referring to. First are the three tenets. The three tenets. So based the three tenets, I will. The three tenets are three principles that are based on the Buddhist Dharma, and there are core principles that we are always practicing, the tenets. We are practicing not knowing, we are practicing bearing witness, and we are practicing loving action, and or maybe more broadly addressed as the appropriate action. These three tenets are, in many senses, the infrastructure of the Bernie's perception and concept of peacemaking, being also the core obligation, vow, and never-ending practice of the Zen peacemaker. The tenet of not knowing is based on the Buddhist concept of emptiness, and it is on an ongoing strive towards letting go and emptying ourselves from prior knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, and attachments. When being in the not knowing, we embrace kind of a beginning mindset, being able to doubt and explore from a new perception without a clear notion of where will that exploration lead to. From this state of not knowing, we can be fully one with the present moment. Then the next one is the bearing witness. based on the Buddhist concept of suchness. This is the strive to bear witness to all the joy and suffering around us, being present to the reality as it is in its suchness, being totally open to whatever arises, fully diving in or plunging into the situation around us, hearing, seeing, feeling around us and also inside us, all bringing in all the components and all the ingredients of the reality and of our inner uh, world to our body and mind, the bad, the pain, the good, the happiness, the ugly, the rejected. Bearing witness and listening means letting go or giving up the separation between the subject and the object. Bearing witness to the place itself, like in Auschwitz retreat, I will talk about it later. In Auschwitz, the place is titled as the Makom. Makom in Hebrew, meaning a place, and also mean God, means opening ourselves in Auschwitz retreats to the Makom without avoidance or denial to the hearing of all the voices, bearing witness to see the same in other circumstances, to bear witness or see lost communities, deprived communities, homeless and on the streets, conflict zones, always there, being in the bearing witness. Appropriate action, based on the Buddhist concept of loving action, is the spontaneous call for action that arises from bearing witness out of the not knowing. In the context of peacemaking, it is an action, a social service of disfragmenting, of healing, of connecting all the pieces of the whole. So, the next principle that I would like to talk about as a main principle in the peacemaking and the Zen peacemakers movement, following Bernie Glassman, the concept of peacemaking is based on the concept of, of whole. That whole world of unlimited phenomena is eventually all part of one body, with no inside or outside. We and all sentient beings are all interconnected in a way that any harm or suffering of one person or group immediately affects all the other. The notion of the interbeing or interconnectedness among people, groups, inner parts of ourselves, between religions, between cultures, between perpetrators and victims, between the environment and its inhabitants, with no permanence and no separation, is really the essence of Bernie perceptions of peace. The whole, linguistically supported with the fact that in Hebrew, peace, shalom, and whole, shalem, are coming from the same root. Peace is shalom, whole is shalem. Making peace is making the whole. Making peace is making the shalem. Peacemaking is therefore the ongoing process of weaving all the fragmented pieces into the whole. Pieces that are all part of the one, all basically and fundamentally identical and interconnected, and at the same time, very, very different. Different in our physical appearance, in our personalities, born traits, ethnical and cultural backgrounds, and the place we come from. Differences leading to huge and rich diversity. Connecting all the parts, realizing that they are all different, but they are not others, leading to the harmony, and harmony that is achieved by different cultures, different religions, different societies, searching for their common principles and beliefs, finding way to complement each other. Harmony is achieved out of inclusion and not exclusion, out of not defining any human or sentient being as the other. We are different, but we are not others. We are similar. In Auschwitz, like in many places in the world, people were being killed just because they were perceived as others. And this is why, so symbolically, Bernie called the retreat in Auschwitz an one people event. In the Jewish sacred stream of the Kabbalah, there is a story imaging the creation as a light lamp that was broken into tiny pieces, and the role of the tzaddik or mensch or bodhisattva is to amend them back to their whole. It is an ongoing process of social action to heal, to redeem the suffering, solve and avoid new conflict, cure the sick, rehabilitate prisoners, solve tension between people and countries, and so on. Every painful part is a wound of the entire society, and every wound healed is part of curing the entire world, also known in the Jewish tradition as tikkun olam, action taken to repair and improve the world. I know, even though I'm in Israel, in Tel Aviv, I know from my connections with you all in the outer world, that the wound in Israel, Palestine, is being felt and very much, and worries so much all over the world. And this is the wound in this area that is painful to the whole body of the world. As such, the perpetrator and the victim are not separate entities. These definitions and terms are part of reciprocal being dynamics or part of their own personal perception or collective history. Eventually, every perpetrator is also a victim, and every victim might be also a perpetrator. The perpetrator is the victim of the circumstances of his life or of his blindness in perceiving the reality as it is. As Thich Nhat Hanh articulates in his beautiful poem, Call Me by My True Names, he articulates, I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee, on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am also the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. Viewing them as one pushes the boundaries of the commonly accepted definitions and narrative that sustain conflict and separation, thereby creating opportunities for change and repair. Repair that is achieved by perpetrators and victims, bearing witness to themselves and as others, and thereby acknowledging and being aware of their own role in the harm and the suffering that was caused. It is out of this process of bearing witness, out of not knowing, that also complicated places as the Middle East could possibly and maybe gradually change. If, for instance, we as Israelis would be open to see the violence of October 7th and the perpetrators who committed the crimes in October 7th, as seeing them as victims of many years of Israeli degradation and occupation. The mere factor of willing to be vulnerable and acknowledge and accept our role as perpetrators can possibly prevent more violence and slowly leads to a shift, a tikkun, a repair. So let's pray. The process of weaving the whole is based on practicing the fullness of life out of non-duality and non-separation. This requires to overcome the frustration caused by the emotional overflow of not being able to attain all the needs and to live up to the expectations. Making peace is a process very much depending on the circumstances with no ability to define or predict the outcomes in advance. When in the process, a state of mind based on expectation, followed by a clear definition of the perceived outcome and desire to succeed, can often lead to fear and to frustration. In contrast, changing the expectation instead of expectation to a state of a mind based on hope. Hope can generate positive energy and perseverance needed to sustaining the vision and intention. Hope also helps utilize all existing resources. And then, when hope is backed up by strong belief, it eliminates or at least reduces fear and provides the confidence needed to take another appropriate action out of not knowing and bearing witness. It also helps us to perceive failures and difficulties as challenges, as opportunities to learn and to improve and to change again. So, what are the practices of the Zen peacemaker? First of all, is vows. Based on the three tenets and the perception of peacemaking as a process of weaving and amending the whole, one of the most effective forms of transforming the concept into action is by the practice of vows. The vows are ongoing commitments to pursue one's strive for making the whole, while the vow to serve all sentient beings, the vow of Bodhisattva, is underlying it, understanding that we cannot include them all. The first three basic vows are those of oneness, diversity, and harmony. By vowing to be oneness, the peacemaker commits himself to not exclude anybody and to see all as one. By vowing to be diversity, the peacemaker commits himself or herself to the practice of identifying when differences are caused by segregation. By vowing to be in harmony, the peacemaker commits himself to freely move between embracing the differences of the diversity while not excluding and accepting the never-ending changes. Second set of the vows of the peacemaker really compose the basic orientation which are by vowing to penetrate to the unknown, the peacemaker commits himself or herself to let go of expectations, attachments, and conditioned state of mind. Knowledge, previous knowledge, stigmas. By vowing to bear witness to the peacemaker commits himself to be open and present to all forms of suffering and joy. When bearing witness to someone who hurts us, or our loved ones, we are the victim with his wound. We are also the perpetrator with his rage and aggression, and we are all other roles and parts of the surrounding environment at the same time. We are all. This is often achieved when practicing deep meditation. Our fixed and separated identity dissolves, giving place to a more transparent and maybe broad one. By vowing to heal myself and others, the peacemaker commits himself to be open to what action arises and spontaneously carry it out. So we have also in our practices in the Zen Peacemaking, we are bearing witness retreats, a form of practice designed to enable the peacemakers to bear witness out of not knowing in conflict zones, out of bearing witness and listening to all the voices, perpetrators and victims, and to the place itself, hamakom. The appropriate action then will arise, giving place to loving action. Then we have also street retreats, a similar form of action designed to bear witness out of not knowing, out of losing our own identity and going out of the of our safe zones to the underprivileged, to those who are marginalized in the society, those whose circumstances led them to a cycle of helplessness. And then we have the way of counsel, listening circles, an indigenous form of practice emphasizing the need to listen and to speak from the heart out of openness, compassion, and spontaneity. This practice is always a strong component of the different retreats and also different occasions in our life. We have also spiritual, really religious rituals and services, a form of practice usually designed as multi-faith or multicultural event, focusing on the common core while enjoying the diversity. Then we are practicing also koan and humor, like practicing the being clowns, for example, such practicing supporting self-deprecation. So, based on this view of peacemaking, I would like now to share with you my personal practice and experience in implementing the way of the Zen peacemaker. I will begin with a kind of, maybe I will share the history of my life here in Israel. I was born in Tel Aviv. Also, my parents were born in Tel Aviv. They were born under the British mandate. My grandparents were born in Jerusalem, and my ancestors arrived from Yemen under the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century. They came to the Holy Land not out of Zionism, but in order to live in land of the Bible, side by side with whoever lived here without any difference. In a way, I am Palestinian. In the birth, my birth certificate of my mother and father, it is written that they were in Palestine, were born in Palestine. I am Jewish by religion, now practicing Buddhism, and I'm Israeli by nation. I also lived in between, I always lived in between wars and bloodshed since I was born. One of the wars in 1967 brought us the curse of the occupation. I always was looking for a way to understand and find different ways of coping with the occupation and the conflict between Israel and Palestine, between Israelis and Palestinians. That is why I made my research on principles and practices of peacemaking as they are applied by socially engaged Buddhist peace movements. I understood that I cannot solve that conflict or the occupation against which we were so much. Of course, being the situation as horrible and tragic as it is now, I understood that this is a job for our government to do, which they don't. But maybe we might do something for the beginning of peacemaking, contributing our small part to creating the whole, the puzzle of the infrastructure for peace out of not knowing, from bottom up, from people to people, from Palestinians to Israelis. I think that I will share with you now my first vow for peace work and taking action. So it was in my first Auschwitz retreat. Since this first retreat, I was in Auschwitz, I think like maybe 15 times or many. Um, um, and there I was, it was my first one. I even didn't facilitate a council, just participant. I was with me and Tani, my partner. We we were there together with Ihab. Ihab is a Palestinian friend whom I didn't know. He lives in Jaffa. I came from Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv Jaffa is a contested city. I came to the retreat trying really to be in the not knowing, which is not easy to a woman, girl, who is Jewish Israeli, to empty my mind of so many years of memorial ceremonies, fears, and narratives about the Holocaust. I was bearing witness to the camp, to the participant, to the stories, and to Ihab. We were being so very close, Ihab and I, and Tani, my partner, and we felt so similar in our behaviors, in our background. We felt like cousins. We shared the same history, knew the same places. We were speaking the same language, which we were the only three that were speaking Hebrew, because anyone else, most of the people were speaking together English and then other languages like French, German, Polish, and such. But I was a Jewish Israeli, and he was Israeli Palestinian and Islamic Imam. We were equal in the camp, but I realized that when we return to real life, we'll be different. Then came the opening. The insight of the action to be taken arose in me so clearly. I felt and I knew that I have to do something about the injustice and inequality in my society. So it was my vow that became my path in life. I began with a small program in Israel. It was my first uh, peace activity. I began with a small program of presenting to Israelis a documentary about the bereaved families from both sides who lost their beloved ones in the conflict. The bereaved families movement is built on Palestinians and Israelis that lost their beloved ones in the conflict. And I did it with my Palestinian friend, Ali Abu Awad. Since then, I built a network of um, activists in Israel. People found me bringing ideas and suggestions for joint projects. We did it as Israelis and Palestinians. The most important thing was to have partners. That's what I learned from my mentor in Sri Lanka, who was a leader of a big peace people movement, Buddhist movement in Sri Lanka of 15,000 villages under it. He said, his name is was Arya Ratna, and he told me, when you want to begin a peace action, first of all, find partners from Palestine or from Israel, better from both. We have had established a Palestinian and Israeli movement by the name of Leading the Leaders to Peace. We initiated peace walks like Bethlehem Walk. We began to add Palestinians from Gaza and West Bank. We began to meet as friends, inviting Palestinians and Israelis for Shabbat dinners, even till now, by the way. In all my projects and groups, it was important for me to teach and practice together the three tenets and the way of counsel. I think that the term practice is well known and spoken now in so many places that I even do not know. Many times we began from small scale, small groups, like a very small plunge to Israel-Palestine conflict with a group of European ZPO and then peacemakers and Palestinians. Many times we planned one thing, by the way, and found ourselves with something else that was born out of it, and because of the condition, situation, and reality as they are. The main principle was that we are not two parties, not two sides. We are us, we are we are one big community, which we refuse to split, and we reject the idea that we are other from each other. I mean, Israelis and Palestinians. That made a base of trust and hope in our bleeding and desperate arts. Years later, while bearing witness to the horror in Gaza, we, as group of psychologists named Psychoactive, arranged quite a big conference in Tel Aviv of non-violence resistance to the occupation, bringing mental health professionals from Gaza and the West Bank. Our Palestinian partners slept in our houses. We were cooking and eating together. Out of that, we established a group of psychologists and mental health professionals working on coping with trauma of both sides and implementing the three tenets. And from there, we developed the way of Buddhist psychology and social action for mental health professionals, especially in Israel and beyond. And there is also Hafez from Gaza, who sends me till now flowers every Friday, and I send him back, even now. Although a small drop in the sea, it is interesting to know that with the money raised by our organization, Hafez and his family succeeded to leave Gaza for now. We are still supporting him, still financially. Again, a drop in the ocean, but still. We had a project in Deir Istia, Palestinian village. There we initiated a project of home gardening with my friend Naima, who unfortunately died later on from cancer, but still with her husband, Zohir, we initiated cooking, Palestinian cooking workshop, in which we were cooking and dining together after preparing our food.
Sorry to interrupt you, Iris. You've talked about so much. I was wondering if we could have a time for some question and answers.
Yes, a minute. I think I will stop in maybe 3 minutes.
Sure.
And then we will
Great.
open.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, I want to emphasize again and again that Bernie's aspiration, may we always have the courage to bear witness, to see ourselves as the other, and to see others as ourselves. Very important for me. Only now, I must say, it is much more difficult since Israel is in time of terrible and never-ending aggressive war, unbelievable amount of killings and destruction. Inside the country, lots of deep disagreements, disputes, political struggles, and deterioration. Out of ongoing demonstration against the government that we are attending nowadays, it is difficult, I must admit, and even impossible to accept, understand, and listen to the other side in our society, especially referring to the occupation that brought us to this situation. For me, much more important part of building the infrastructure for the future is getting closer to our partner in Palestine from the past in the present. Getting closer means that we have to be meeting as much as we can, thus keeping the roots of mutual trust that we have been building in the past. personally trying to be in the not knowing, especially knowing based on attachment to individual collective traumas, then bearing witness to all voices and practicing compassion to ourselves to start with, then to others as well, which is not easy. I want to finish this part by read Pema Chodron's beautifully saying, Pema Chodron, the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and they fall again. It is just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen, room for grief, room for relief, room for misery, and for joy. And another quotation that I want to bring to you, it is from Tao teacher about chaos. Chaos, where brilliant is where brilliant dreams are born. Before the beginning of a great brilliance, there must be chaos. Before a brilliant person begins something great, they must look foolish to the crowd. So this is my thing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Iris. So now why don't we open it up for questions or comments? You can go ahead and raise your electric hand or wave. No questions? Well, here's Justin.
Thank you. Thank you, Iris. I'm curious, you said multiple Auschwitz retreats, and I'm really curious about your own process for participating in multiple retreats and like what difference you've seen over your own experience and maybe your own experience responding to suffering. And then I guess a second follow-up to that is, are you doing any kind of bearing witness in Israel as you know, in your community with people that you know or people that you interact with during all the war and everything that's going on?
Yeah, I didn't understand so very well your question. Please again.
So I guess, you know, what difference have you seen doing multiple bearing witness retreats in Auschwitz in yourself and your capacity to bear witness to suffering? And then are you doing any kind of group bearing witness to what's going on between Israel and Gaza in Israel currently? Like with groups or anything like that?
No, not now. Of course, it's not about retreats here in Israel, Palestine. We had one, we planned two others, but because of the situations, we didn't do it. But I have groups of friends or groups of especially psychologists, since I'm psychologist, that we are practicing, but not in a retreat, you know, like closed retreat of a week, like we have in Auschwitz and other places. We have had also, by the way, with bearing witness retreat in Bosnia, in of course Native Americans, in Rwanda, and many other places of conflict. But we are practicing bearing witness, listening to the voices here in Israel, in Gaza, groups of friends that are more judgmental to the war, to the Hamas, to, very, very, because in Israel there are now so many um, different, really different and voices and opinions. And we are practicing, but not in a retreat, but practicing all the time what we are hearing, what we are feeling, also bad things that we feel, shame, guilt, others, anger, others, such. Thank you for asking. Thank you. Yes, Noam?
Hi, Iris. I just have a small couple of comments. I wanted to say that I was really moved by what you shared today, and I was born and raised in Israel, and I still most of my family still lives in Israel, and it's just I'm just shaking right now just talking to you about it, about what's going on there. And I'm always looking for any little ray of hope. I don't care how small. So, and you gave me some of that. And I deeply appreciate what you shared today, and that there is some hope. And and then just an anecdote. My mother's best friends, one of her best friends when she was a young woman in Israel, was one of the founders of the bereaved families forum. And I've been sort of peripherally involved with them for all these years. And they're one of the groups now that I'm really leaning into for hope. So, thank you.
Thank you, Noam. Thank you very much. So your mother was one of, so that follow because of loss of one member of the family?
No, my mother's friend, one of my mother's friends,
I see.
who was like you, born in Palestine, and whose parents were born in Palestine, had been there
Yes.
a long time,
Yes.
was one of the founders of the bereaved families forum. As far as I know, she herself hadn't lost anyone, but she was one of the people who helped organize it. I'm actually not sure about that part.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, very important movement here in Israel. Very, very active, and aside of combatants for peace, also
Yes.
those who were involved in the war, Palestinians.
Yes.
Like we used to call them terrorists, but Palestinians call them freedom warriors. Yes, just to, yes. And yes, and those who were fighting in the IDF, in the Israeli army, and they are now against war and doing much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Queen.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for this talk today. I just became aware of Zen Peacemakers very recently myself, so I was very excited to see your talk come up. And yeah, also feeling a lot of that hope. So thank you. And I had a couple of comments and questions. First, I just wanted to make sure I heard that at the end you said there was a Taoist story. Did you say cows are where
Chaos.
I could, what is it?
Chaos.
Chaos?
SHO, chaos. Okay. This is my
Okay,
English. I'm so
sorry.
sorry.
Oh,
Chaos.
no worries. I understand now. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay. And
Because, referring to at least to the war as chaos, maybe
yeah.
bringing some change, and especially for brilliant people. Let's see who is the brilliant one who will make something good of this chaos. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's
But
nothing
sometimes it
inherently
is
bad about
in
chaos,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I hear
Yeah,
that.
but it's
Thank you.
chaos, yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask about is the idea of the listening circle. And I wondered if you could talk about that more and maybe how to implement that. Like I am interested currently in joining an intentional community, and I thought it could be something I could offer, like if it sounds like a good practice for us. So just wondered if you could speak on that. Thank you so much.
The way of counsel is also what's in other platforms they call listening circle, and it is based on people or sitting together in a circle, sharing what as we say from the heart, sharing what they think, what they feel, what they the emotions and even ideas, but as they feel them and sees them in this very moment. And others are listening to them and listening from the heart, meaning listening very carefully, like bearing witness out of not knowing, because you are concentrated in the one who is speaking and not referring anymore to the one that was speaking before. That's why we say we are not talking beyond the altar. We are not referring to things that others said, because we want to be concentrated and focused in the listening on the one hand, but in speaking on the other hand. So this is the idea. Of course, when it is in retreat or in other circumstances, we are keeping confidentiality because people are sharing, like in bearing witness retreats, the strong experience brings people to talk about very private and intimate things sometimes, and it is very strong. We have it in the retreats. We have it along 5 days, and this is the only thing that participants are committed to. During the retreat, we are sitting for meditation most of the day, but the listening circle or the way of counsel we are practicing in the morning, and these are the rules of the listening. And we are doing it also in our program. We have a program of joining the ZPO, the Zen Peacemaker Order. So we are practicing the counsel much more also there in many instances of or platforms of the Zen Peacemakers. Yes. Who else? I would like to hear your comments and yes, Mary.
Deep bows to you, Iris. I am a convert to Judaism, and after some years found out I had Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewish ancestors. Not only that, I found out I had Arab, Syrian, and Yemenite ancestors. So there was a war within me, except that my Sangha is grounding me. And I want to thank you today from the bottom of my heart
Thank
for
you.
bringing together all these pieces
Mm.
and reassuring all of us that within ourselves, we can make a small difference. I belong to a small synagogue where there are mostly Christians who come during Midrash and talk about Jesus. And I have needed to be very careful in walking a line with witnessing and also pulling the dialogue back into Torah without causing dissension, without causing shame and humiliation. So thank you today for bringing back these principles that are going to ground me as we go forward here in this very challenging time in history. Not only that, but the history of the United States. And so, so I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Murray. Thank you very much. Yes, David.
Are you talking to me, Iris?
Yes, yes, I can see you. I can see your head.
Well, something that the lady just spoke to is alive for me. So I'm going to speak as if I'm in council. And it has to do with something your partner did. Hello, Tani. I don't see you on my screen, but hello, Tani.
Hi, David. I'm here.
You can go back to the gallery.
Okay, I will do that, and then I'll share 1 minute here. When we were in Auschwitz, Tani, every time he saw me, he would sing to me. Every time we crossed paths, he'd sing a song to me. And it was a beautiful thing because he'd sing about my name, David. So one thing I want to thank you both for is the Auschwitz retreat. I have found a deep calling within myself to remember in my way, in my world, as I walk my journey. Before I was in the camp, I had all these beliefs and judgments and teachings from my parents who were both Auschwitz survivors. And now I have found a place inside of my stomach to remember in my way. But what I want to thank you for, Tani, and what I want to underscore is something that Iris said, that it's even a small action, a tiny action that makes a difference for the whole. And what Tani did is he was called and brought together loving action and appropriate action by something he did. He brought those two things together for me. What happened was we were in the quarantine barracks, which is outside of Birkenau, no electricity at night on a rainy, cold, freezing night. And when I came into that barracks, we sat on mats and there was a presentation. Genro did a presentation with some speakers about Eddie Hillisum. And when I sat on the mat, I lost control of my body. Oh, I can feel it again. The terror, I started to shake and I lost control of my body. Now, I had established a bond with Genro, who was speaking there. And we were all 100 people were in this barracks. And words were not appropriate. Nobody would speak. So here's Genro wanting an interactive experience. And we're sitting in this barracks and I'm shaking and nobody is speaking. So I had this impulse to stand up and try to walk to Genro to say something. And I was shaking and it was very dangerous. And what Tani did was he came across the barracks and he reached out and he held my hand. A simple action in the dark And I was able to walk to Genro, take the microphone, and Genro saw I was still shaking. I had no idea what I was going to say. Genro put his hand on my shoulder and allowed me to realize I wasn't alone in that terror. Like Tani holding my hand, I wasn't alone moving. So I have deep appreciation, Tani. Something I will never forget, and it was very small action. Just holding out your hand to somebody at the appropriate time.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for being sensitive to me, Iris.
Yeah, thank you. Greg?
Hello and thank you. I'm in New Mexico, United States. I have two questions. I don't know how much time we have, but the first is practical. How can we join with you in Israel, being here in the work you're doing? Is there any way we can support it or be part of it? That's the first question. The second question is probably harder to answer, but how do you talk to people? How do you relate to people who are taking sides, one side or the other, and are very dug into a side, and who are engaged in seeing the others as others, even demonizing? How do you try to help them get beyond that position?
Okay. The first question, you asked how can you support us?
Yes.
You are supporting me just now by
Okay.
coming to my talk. And I don't know if you know that we are, we are 10 months now in the war, but today, yesterday, these days are special days because we are under threat of Iranic
Iran.
or Hezbollah attack. And having you with me is kind of support, is kind of you're coming, visiting me and being with me. And this is a lot. And also I believe it's also for Tani, my partner who is sitting here. You can open the gallery so you see everyone. Maybe Chloe, you can do it. Anyway, maybe Tani, you will share later. But and yes, you can stay in touch. You can ask Chloe how. You can join the Zen Peacemakers and begin a path. I promise you it will be a blessed path. And about sides, you see, usually we try in our practice not to take sides. It doesn't mean that our friends, colleagues, clients, students of mine, for example, are the same, because not everybody is practicing spirituality, or nobody was born like people are taking sides many times. To take side is kind of a psychological defense mechanism, that you are taking side and you are fighting for this side, and it gives you kind of strength and power. Anyway, we are trying to practice all the time not to take sides, and listening to the all voices. Like, for example, not this time, but before the war, I once in a meeting I said, a Buddhist meeting, by the way, I say it was like there was a big attack of rockets on the south of Israel, and also attack of the Israeli Air Force in Gaza, killing many people like now, but it was less intense. And I say that I feel very sorry for the children and women and people in Gaza under the bombardments. And one of in the group said, what about south of Israel? No, nobody was killed, but still. And I said, okay, I feel also sorry for the people in south of Israel. So she said, outcome. So I said, I don't know, but I can hear them, I can feel them both. And I went home and I thought about it, and I said, people are waiting for solution. I don't have any solution, but still what is coming to me when I'm bearing witness, when I'm feeling the suffering of both sides? And then I understood that as much as I'm feeling the suffering of both sides, as much as I'm bearing witness, I can feel the compassion. And compassion to whom? To myself, because I have this all suffering. And out of my compassion to myself, I can feel also compassion to others. And it goes very, very far, because then sometimes practicing again and again, bearing witness to all voices, I can feel compassion also to the killers. And another example is when of another way of practicing is that I have a student I had a workshop with psychologists, and one of the psychologists said, I feel that I hate so much Bibi Netanyahu that I want him and his wife Sarah and his son Yair to be burned alive. So he said, and he's practicing Buddhism. So he said, I feel ashamed, but that's what I feel. I feel it. And I don't know what to do with this feeling, but I feel it. I want them to be da, da, da. So there are people in Israel, because, the opinions are very, very extreme here, and out of the suffering and the confusion and such. And I told him, he said, what will I do with this hatred that I have, with this aggression, with this? And then I said, try to think about Netanyahu as a person, try to think about him like dressed like normally and coming home after work. It is very hot and humid here now in Israel, very, sweating and such, and coming home and seeing if there is something to just imagine himself going to take a shower. Just imagine himself going to bed. It is kind of not knowing, which is trying to see a person as he is. See, it's not that I am asking you to agree with Netanyahu. I don't, of course, of course, also this is my political attitude, of course. I don't ask you to forgive him, because we are very angry and with him. But this hatred that you have, it's not anger. It is something that you are suffering of, this hatred. So try to think about him as a person. Don't forgive him, don't accept him, don't agree. That just as a person, not taking off, sorry to speak like that, taking off his jacket, for example, and see what happens. And something happens. This is about the not knowing. And this is about the bearing witness. And it is a practicing. And sometimes you discover, I practice it is also in my clinic, not knowing. And sometimes you discover that this emptiness is a blessing. You don't have to make any effort. You just don't know.